Good evening and welcome, and also a warm welcome to all present in person and online. Maybe to start, my name is Bob Selderslags. I'm a teaching artist and researcher at the Royal Conservatoire of Antwerp, where in collaboration with Fontys Academy of the Arts in Tilburg, I'm conducting research on teaching artistry, which in short means professional artists activating people's artistry for a range of purposes. Please note for the people online that this is a recorded session. Dear Chen, in 2022, I attended a workshop with you at the International Teaching Artist Conference in Oslo. And that left a deep impression on me. You showed images of how you worked with theater of the oppressed, with Israelis and Palestinians in the West Bank. You engaged in some exercises with us and discussed your work. And I think it was the first time I was so consciously learning about artivism and its impact. Now, Eric Booth describes artivism, this combination of art and activism, as a form of teaching artistry, as one of the purpose threads in his brilliant book, Making Change, Teaching Artists and Their Role in Shaping a Better World. And it's about this particular purpose thread that I would like to talk with you tonight. Now, before we get started, I would like to give a brief comment on this talk, because some people may have questions about this event. For example, why exactly am I providing you, an Israeli teaching artist and academic, with a forum on this topic? I consider you, Chen, as a connecting figure, someone who does not coincide with your origins or government, but who is a bridge builder as an artist and an activist. Your work and commitment convince me that you are the person of choice to explain and illustrate this form of teaching artistry. Artivism leads to controversy because activism, by definition, wants to bring about political and/or social change. Avoiding that controversy is not advisable, as it would mean selling the significance and impact of teaching artistry short. But also because, as a research team, we are convinced that, certainly in an educational context, we must continue to engage in dialogue without being blind for the injustices that occur. People attending this talk online cannot switch on their cameras or microphones, but they can formulate questions for you in the chat. Those attending in person may slip me a note if they like. I will try to monitor them, but I will reserve the right to make a choice and only ask you a question if it seems appropriate to me. Having said that, I'd like to turn the floor over to you, Chen. Perhaps introducing yourself briefly, knowing that those who are here in person have just watched the film Disturbing the Peace, but those connecting online may not have that background. And of course, maybe I think we're all quite curious about your response maybe to the news that reached us just a couple of hours ago that Israel and Hamas have agreed to a ceasefire in Gaza. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bob, and thank you all for being there in person and the people who are online. I would like to open with a comment that is related to what I believe that is your emotional state right now, the people who watched Disturbing the Peace, because I feel, although I didn't watch it this time, tonight, I watched it like more than 100 times in the past decade. But I think this particular moment, I feel inside me quite the same. We all feel quite the same, as devastated by the atrocities and the loss of lives of innocent people and the images of violence and the outcome of violence. But as the film concludes, with kind of a vector to the future with hope and humanity. I mean, the closing scene, the closing monologue, when Muhammad says there in the end, the change starts with one person, with his family or her family, the neighborhood, the town, the village, the town, the city, the state, the country, the continent, and then all Earth becomes peaceful. I know it's not the right prediction right now to the future, but it's a moment. I mean, just we've struggled here for 15 months, demonstrating every day for a ceasefire, to stop the war, to stop the bloodshed, to stop the massacre, and to reach this moment like an hour ago before we meet. It's a very dramatic moment for me. I didn't forget the loss, the violence, the massacres, the devastation of, I mean, just 2 nights ago, I was waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning by siren with my family running to the shelter. And I'm every day watching hours and hours of images of atrocities in Gaza. And a close friend of mine lost his son a few weeks ago in Gaza. So I'm very excited to see you today, to meet with you, and to say that this is a moment that is very, that is resonating the film, the documentary, in our journey in Combatants for Peace. So thank you for allowing me to being with you in this moment.
Mm-hmm. Of course, I think that, yeah, I guess the film ends in, I think, 2017.
15.
15. You and there is, of course, there has a lot has happened in the meantime, and there's been this horrific escalation since 7 October 23. You let me know earlier that that in 2 weeks there is also a premiere of There's Another Way, which is kind of a sequel to Disturbing the Peace. Could you say something about how Combatants for Peace has evolved since October 7?
Yeah. Yeah, I just got messages a few minutes ago from my Palestinian colleagues that you saw in the film, from Suli, from Jamil, and they are very excited. We are all, you know, it's very hectic here with messages and phone calls and Zooms saying what's the next step after the ceasefire. So yes, there's Stephen Apcon, the director and the producer of Disturbing the Peace, the film that you've just saw, came to Israel and Palestine right after October 7th and started the sequel or the next step. We didn't know where it's going to go, our journey. I have to be honest. October 7th was kind of an earthquake for our binational community. A lot of people left us. More people joined us since then, because this process of getting sober from, as they call it, the people who left us said that they got sober. They understood that there will never be peace, that it's not doable, not achievable, on both sides, by the way. And we started, we rethink our journey, which is since the film went out in 2015, there was a decade of very long and deep and rich work that we have done on both parallel lanes that you saw in the film, actually. And both of them are nurtured by art, by theater, and I will explain. One journey that Combatants for Peace is walking through is the reconciliation, the peace, peace building, the dialogue, the rehumanization of the other, rehumanization of your ex-enemy. And the other path is the nonviolent journey nonviolent struggle, confrontation, as you saw in the film, and struggle against the occupation, against the apartheid system, direct actions. And the theater is actually in service of both paths. One for, of course, for dialogue, reconciliation, rehumanization, and, you know, just in various techniques that maybe we will elaborate later. And as you saw in the film, and you will see in the sequel of, there is another way of the documentary that depicts the previous year, we use theater, all modes of theater and art and artivism, as you quoted Eric. And one more thing I want to say about this, that in the past decade, we've made these two journeys and the intertwined energy and synergy between the reconciliation and the peace building and the rehumanization, and with the nonviolent struggle and the development of a nonviolent community, binational community through arts in a very respectable way, that of course failed in October 7th, and we went down back to square one. Not our community, but our societies went through a regression of hatred, dehumanization, and we had to struggle very, very, very strong against this tendency of it's useless, we're hopeless, there is no hope, and so on. So we're at the stage, I mean, 2 hours ago, I would tell you that we're still, you know, hopeless, and not us, but right now there's a breakthrough in both societies, that you can feel the energy through the messages and through the medias. The Palestinian and the Israeli media now are not talking about peace, of course, but talking about a new phase, which I hope will be more hopeful than the previous one.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Could you tell a bit more about your work with theater? I believe that you focus mostly on theater of the oppressed and polarized theater as an artivist, or could you tell us a bit about that, how you came about, and what does that entail?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's the main thing. I just want to say, I mean, to start with by saying that I don't know how many people are familiar with Theatre of the Oppressed, the original model by Augusto Boal, the Brazilian thinker and director and facilitator, as he called the Joker. Maybe I should say a few words about this. I mean, I'm not only a theater director or teacher, or as Augusto Boal said, that the Joker system and the Joker role is a director, actor, theater maker, a playwright, a political leader, activist leader, therapist, whatever the need of the group, the community, the people he or she works with. So trying to implement all these roles in my life, not only in Combatants for Peace, but I do a lot of work in the past 24 years with Theatre of the Oppressed. But I realized after it's in the film, so I will repeat it for the people who didn't watch the film. After I was a major in the Israeli army and I refused to serve in the occupation and the apartheid, and I was sentenced to jail for a month. And at that time, I was already a professional director and actor in the repertory theater in Israel. And then I quit. And I knew, I tried to quit theater, actually, to be honest, but I didn't manage to do that. I said, okay, now I'm released from jail. I have to to try to find another way, because I couldn't get back to the regular, ordinary, conventional theater who, just perpetrate the same discourse and the same dominant ideology and so on. And to cut a long story short, I found myself training with Augusto Boal, learning about theater of the oppressed, and I started to implement intuitively the techniques and the method with communities. And I found out that my curiosity, my passion, my desire, my inner tendency was to work with conflicted groups, and not only with Jews and Arabs or Israelis and Palestinians, which was, the core of the model, but I found myself along the years working with addicts and non-addicts, with adults and young and youth, with men and women, with prisoners and non-prisoners, and mainly with asylum seekers, refugees, and citizens of Israel. So along the years, I realized that the homogeneous model of Augusto Boal, working with a homogeneous community of oppressed people, does not answer my needs. And theater of the oppressed is all about needs of the people who are doing theater of the oppressed, and needs of the people who are not consuming, not at all, but activated by theater of the oppressed. And I realized that the context, which is another important word in theater of the oppressed, that the democratization of the process is always contextualization of the process. And in my context, in the Israeli-Palestinian context, and the traumas that I experienced through violence and hatred and dehumanization, my need for theater, as someone who has been deeply transformed from violence to non-violence, was to develop this work with conflicted communities. And I actually did a lot of experimental processes, and some of them I even shared with Augusto Boal and discussed and negotiated with a lot of people from the international community of theater of the oppressed, trying to find ways to implement the homogeneous method of theater of the oppressed with conflicted communities, with polarized societies, with polarized groups. And maybe later we will talk about more. So yeah, I just wanted to return to one moment in the film, and that's the film with the bread and puppet demonstration that we do in a polarized spatial mode. So the Israelis are on the Israeli side, the Palestinians are on the other side, and we are creating a public event of declaration of Palestinian independent state. That's the thing, with a lot of aesthetic images of joy and freedom, and the puppets and the communities are looking at each other while they are separated by the separation wall. And what is interesting there is that in a way, when you do activist theater like this that confronts the violence and the oppression, they interfere, they intervene in the scene, and they enter the scene on the stage that we prepared for them. They go in between the fences, and they don't talk, they don't use text in this intervention, but they do what they ought to do in the script, and they are violent. They are throwing shocking grenades only to one side, to the Palestinian side. And while Jamil, my friend, is telling them this is a non-violent demonstration, we are doing the same what our Israeli Jewish fellows are doing. Why you are being violent towards us? And I am, as a joker, as a director, as a theater maker, reflecting to the Israelis and to the Palestinians. I mean, I'm creating a reflection as a mode of what Paulo Freire, I mean, the pedagogy of a Brazilian who's kind of was the teacher of Augusto Boal said the praxis of action and reflection at the same time, that you are taking an action, you are being reflective on the action, and that will produce and create the next action, which will be different, which will be transformative. And we are calling to the soldier, we are inviting the soldier to take out the uniform, to throw the weapon, and to join us. And it creates a scene of polarized images that are separated by violence that is not part of this community, but it interferes the community. And I think it's a very emblematic scene of our community, our journey, our vision of how our theater is actually embodying the reality and mark the vision and the future that we are dreaming and visioning and fantasizing together.
It almost sounds like you describe it as a performance where they take on their own roles between the borders and roles that you anticipate on. And I'm wondering, is everyone joining? Maybe not the soldiers, but the ones on both sides, on Palestinian and Israeli sides, aware of these dynamics and how this works? Is this something you talk through, or yeah, how does that work?
Of course, we are working in circles. So the inner circle, the leading circle, and the people who are 20 years in this journey. This is our language, this is our terminology, this is our vocabulary, this is how we've developed our community through this action and reflection and the creative terminology that we have. For example, we don't talk about coexistence, we talk about co-resistance. We don't talk about what's the word? Anyway, we are working with new, we're not talking about a zero-sum game or narrative that it's my narrative or your narrative or this, either the pro-Israeli or pro-Palestinian. We're trying to produce the third narrative, which is not either or, but both narratives mixed in a dramaturgic way. So this is our vocabulary. This is what we do. And a lot of this terminology evolved of theatrical work, because we've based the foundation of the movement 20 years ago intuitively was based on personal stories. And our personal stories were kind of, we just had the inspiration of the Truth and Reconciliation committees of South Africa. So when as you saw in the film, that we started to gather and to talk, to meet secretly and confidentially, because we were afraid, both from the occupation and the authorities, and from each side. We thought that they are from Hamas and they will kidnap us. They thought that we are from the Mossad and we'll try to make them collaborators. And we had to build trust. And the way to build trust was based on personal stories. And our personal stories has a very simple dramaturgy. We all tell the same story, but mirror stories. And we found out, we analyzed it along the years as a dramatic monologue. And it has 5 chapters, these monologues. It's previous generation. My grandfather, my grandparents immigrated from Europe because they were Zionists. And this is how they survived the Holocaust. They were the only one of their families. Jamil's grandfather was killed in the Nakba in 48, what we call the Independence War. So we started with our grandfathers as victims or people who escaped or were killed, and then our household. The way the education system, we have nowhere to go. This is our land. This is our homeland. We have to protect it. There is no way to protect it without violence. We have to take weapon. There are heroes before us who were fighting for us, and we are obliged to follow them and to fight back. Then we are initiating into the violent circles, holding weapon, protecting our families, our communities, our freedom, our security, and so on. And then something happened while the violent experience, and then we are being transformed. In our case, we refuse to serve in the army anymore. In their case, it happens while they are sitting in Israeli jails, or after they are being released from Israeli jails, after they were violent part of the armed struggle or violent struggle. And this is what we call the uninational transformation. Then comes the binational transformation, understanding that avoiding violence is only the first step towards peace, reconciliation, building the future, and so on. And then we started to work together. And I define the sixth transformation as the artistic transformation, to look at nonviolence actually as art, as a form of art. So doing all this dialogue, reconciliation, rehumanization work, and developing nonviolent struggle, direct action, resistance to the occupation and to the apartheid and to oppressive mechanism is a form of art. And I believe that nothing is a better tool to implement the art as theater and nonviolence. These are two parallel artistic modes for me.
And what is there a role for aesthetics in it? Because it's being used as a tool. I can imagine it's very process oriented. Is there a role of aesthetics in artivism?
Absolutely. I mean, this is not unique in my perception and in my approach. I don't see a difference between aesthetics, therapy, and activism. I think politics, therapy, aesthetics are intertwined, and they should be intertwining and nurtured each other. I mean, I think there are so many beautiful modes of nonviolence, like I described like we saw in the film. The two communities with the huge puppets observing each other, looking at each other, is a beautiful image. I think it's very aesthetic. Or when we are translating our traumas, this is the therapeutic mode of, like when we did, I'll give you just one example. I once did a theater workshop with Israelis and Palestinians in Combatants for Peace with photo elicitation. And I asked them to bring, to each participant, to bring few photos. And we realized that most of the Palestinians and most of the Israelis brought at least one photo that was of people with khaki uniforms, M16 in their hands. And so it was kind of the same image, an image of violence. Both of them had a very tough and difficult experience to watch the other side's photo. And it took a lot of work and a lot of process to realize that it's the same image, people with khaki uniform, M16 in their hands, a lot of images of masculinity, violence, and each side thought that their image is soft and nostalgic and positive and defensive and patriotic, and the other side is terrorist and violent and so on. And then we started to unpack these images to try to make them aesthetics. Like there's an exercise of Augusto Boal that called the ideal image. So you create an image of a model, of an anti-model, like the other side, and then with the same actors, the same images, the same uniform, you create your own image of your photo, and it looks the same. It looks the same, except from the interpretation, the reading. People realized how ridiculous is watching this same image and interpreting it differently. And I give you another example of aesthetics and ethics of the forum theater. I mean, it's an example. Maybe it's not the aesthetics that you are asking about, like what is the beauty or colorful, complex forms of theater or of composition. But I think when there is a very clear situation on stage, and I give you the example, and it will be clear. So there's a forum scene. Forum theater is a mode of theater. It's actually the basis of theater of the oppressed. It's a scene that based on a true story or story of oppression. One protagonist is telling the story, and then we build a scene over this true story of oppression that was not resolved in the reality, and we are opening the stage for interventions of spectators. In Theatre of the Oppressed, we do not accept the word spectators. We are all spect-actors, and we are inviting the spectators to become actors and to intervene in the scene and to replace the protagonist. In polarized Theatre of the Oppressed model, we are allowing people, after few trials of intervening and replacing the protagonist, we are allowing the audience, which is polarized, Israelis and Palestinians together, to replace other characters, other roles in the scene. So the scene was a scene of a young Palestinian who went to hospital with his brother to release his grandfather from a hospital after an operation. Then he tried to come back to his village, and the soldier in the roadblock checkpoint are stopping him and not allowing him to cross a few hundred meters with his grandfather to the village, because they say you don't have the permit. You have to do a detour of 32 kilometers and to reach your village. And he tried to convince them, and he tell them he's after operation, my grandfather. Then the soldier calls the officer. There are some peripetia, as you know, Aristotle call it in the Greek tragedy. And so this is the scene, a scene of oppression. So we perform this in Shufa village in front of polarized audience, 100 Israelis and 100 Palestinians. And we show the scene. The soldiers were uniform and the Palestinians got some traditional outfit, and it all went very well. The actors are mixed. There's in the checkpoint, the soldiers are Israelis and Palestinians actor. The Palestinian grandchild and his brother and the grandfather are mixed. One of them is Israeli and two Palestinians. So it's all mixed. And then I opened the stage for interventions, for the spect actors to intervene. And one young Palestinians were, raising his hand. I want to go. I want. And I said, come on. And he went to the scene. He replaced the grandchild. And immediately, he didn't even wait for action or 1, 2, 3 or a sign. He ran into the checkpoint and he started to attack physically the soldiers who were played by Israelis and Palestinian actors. And we all say, stop, 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 stop. This is theater, no violence, no. And finally, all the Palestinians on stage were holding him, stopping him from beating them and the two Israeli actors on stage. And I asked him, did he succeed? He said no. And I've noticed while he was beating up the actors, and it was very violent, that all the Palestinians are laughing and all the Israelis are shocked in the audience. And I asked him if he would like to listen to some reflections of the audience. And all the Palestinians' remarks were that he wasn't violent, that I should let him pass through this, that to finish the work and to pass with his grandfather, even if he will be shot by the soldiers. And all the Israelis said that he was violent in this intervention. So that was a reflection in itself, to see. And So the forum theater is not only about the action and the intervention. It was, the Israelis were very disappointed by the laughter of the Palestinians. The Palestinians were shocked that the Israelis thought that an unarmed grandchild trying to go through physically the checkpoint that is considered to be violent in the first place by their perception, they were shocked that they considered it as violence. So the conversation that is being created of seeing the same stage, same action, same image, and I think it's an aesthetic question. I mean, I'm returning to your remark about aesthetics. It's an artistic lesson for me. People are observing an aesthetic space that they see the same action, same actors, same images, same plot, and they perceive it differently. And then an Israeli woman said, I want to do an intervention as well. And she got on stage too. She got this grandchild outfit to become the character. And she asked the grandfather and the brother to stay remote to the checkpoint. She said, I will take care of this. She went to the soldiers. She went down on her knees and she started to beg and to cry with tears. It was a real cry, saying, don't you have a grandfather? Don't you? She really begged them and tried. And then it was the same. All the Palestinians were laughing and all the Israelis were moved by her gesture, by her action. So then I asked her, did you manage to succeed to cross the checkpoint with your grandfather? She said, no. The Palestinian guy, after he said, I didn't succeed, but I wanted to show the Israelis that even though they are the strong side, I will never give up my dignity and my honor to try and to use force and to win and prevail and so on. So her intervention was in response to this. And she said, no, I didn't succeed, but I wanted to show the Palestinians by action that no matter what the situation is, we are partners in the belief that violence is not the solution, it's always the problem, and we are resisting and refusing to serve, to use violence in our mutual struggle, mutual life, and so on. So it's an answer of how aesthetic become a conversation, how the aesthetics is, and this all was outdoors, in site specific. We were performing it in a real checkpoint, staffed by real soldiers watching, observing our theatrical event. And it was a really site specific. I mean, in terms of aesthetics, it was perfect. It was the real checkpoint and the real roadblock, real soldiers with real weapons around us. So I think aesthetically, it's much more efficient than creating a decor in a proper theater.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really powerful stuff. I wonder how you deal with these dynamics and these. You teach artivism at university, theater students at the theater department. Is this something the work you do with them also is, how do you work with them on this kind of
right now I have in Tel-Aviv University a theater group I just worked with them on Monday, so it was 2 days ago. It's a year project at the university that is supported and funded by the university of Israelis and Palestinians, Palestinian Israeli citizens that are students at the university. We are doing a polarized theater of the oppressed model, students from all over the campus, Jews and Arabs, Israelis and Palestinians. I have to be honest that it's quite difficult. It works. It's kind of a miracle within the campus. And I just did an exercise with them a few days ago that was very difficult to create the polarization, to look, to observe at the. So this is one example of a concrete polarized model of Jews and Arabs, Israelis and Palestinians. But I work with my students with various populations, with people with disabilities. We have another project with young people on the spectrum. So we work inside the campus, outside the campus, but mainly with polarized model, either polarized model of theater of the oppressed or a softer community-based theater in polarized model.
Mm-hmm.
And we do other artivist stuff on campus, again, with puppets and with direct actions and with performance and various performance languages that we use in order to, as artivism, which are not only proper theater, but more, installation and performance, all sorts of performance.
Mm-hmm. Okay. On something different, in 2017, 2018, Sulaiman Khatib and you were nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, and more recently, in July 24, Combatants for Peace won the Organizational War Abolisher Award. How important are those kinds of recognition? Do they have a significant impact on your work or on what you want to achieve?
On some level, yes. I mean, it's always nice to get acknowledgement, and that's the level of prizes and awards. But on a deeper level, I must say that on a deeper level, we need the international community. We need to transform, and we do a lot of work. It's part of our strategy to transform the international community like we do right now, from spectators to spectators. It's part of our strategy, part of our vision, part of our needs, main needs. We have associations of friends around Europe and mainly in American Friends of Combatants for Peace in the USA. We need it to be empowered, and we need it for resources. We need it for funds, because we need it in order to survive. We don't get any money from the government, from the authorities, and so on. Of course not. We are ashamed to the apartheid state of Israel and occupation. But on a deeper level, I think, as I started my talk about Muhammad and the circles of you, your family, we truly believe that it's not about us, the story. It's about the world. It's about the humanity. And I think we will not be able, and this is something we've learned along the journey. We went to South Africa, to North Ireland, to the Balkans. We always heard that at the end, the resolution and the peace agreement and everything was kind of synergy of all the struggles, internal and external, all the movements and the organizations and the charities. And everybody said it, everywhere in the world, that the international community played a major role in the final transformation of achieving peace. So we need it as a minority here who still believe in hope and humanity and peace. So we need support, as I said, resources and funds and emotional and ideological and spiritual support. And on a political, concrete level, we need we need political alliances. We need activist alliances. This is what we do here. We first and foremost believe in alliances between Israelis and Palestinians, organizations and movements among themselves and with each other. So let alone the international community. And I have to be honest and to say that one of the main characteristics of living in a war zone, being in time of these times of turmoil and traumas and severe anxiety, and to be surrounded by hatred and animosity and dehumanization, is the feeling of loneliness. And we feel neglected, we feel abandoned most of the time, that we feel forgotten. And each and every interaction and support and intervention of the international community is empowering, is energizing. It gives us hope. It reflects back to us that we are not crazy, we are not insane, that we're doing the right thing, that we are struggling for the world, for the better world, and not for only for our region, and so on. So the answer, the deeper answer, would be that whatever works on the level of local level of transforming people from spectators to spectators is valid to our very specific conversation right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to open the conversation a bit up in that sense that I would like to ask if there's anyone from the audience or anyone listening online who has a question. We have a few more minutes. Maybe there's something I'm forgetting to ask, and you think, why doesn't he ask this? This is the moment. Is there anyone who has a question for Chen? Not immediately. I'm looking if there's something in the chat. I think that there are a few drama students attending this movie and talk. Young people who are starting to take their first steps in the field. Do you have any particular recommendations for them?
Wow, it's always I would really ask them. I mean, my recommendation would be to ask them what they need and what they want and what they dream of, and that's my recommendation, to ask them, you know, to know what's their desire, what's their passion, what's their dream, what are their concern about. So I'm kind of, I mean, people who know Theatre of the Oppressed, who know Augusto Boal, who know the legacy of not preaching, and you know that there is no need, as he said, for political theater. There is a need for politicizing the theater. It means that we are not into messages and tips and preaching, but we are into dialogue. And dialogue, in the deep sense of it, it means that two human beings, at least, are activating each other in order to provide a better world, to provide more justice and equality and equity, and so on. So the only recommendation I have is not to give up under any circumstances on dialogical mode, not to allow ourselves to fall back into the monologue, and to always try to remain in a dialogue. That's what I'm trying to do here, although I'm speaking too much.
But I think I think that's a good recommendation for all of us. Still no questions? Oh, there is a question. There's someone saying, I really admire your work, but I don't understand how you are able to keep having hope. It's more like a comment than a question, I think.
But I understand it as a comment, which is a question that addressing myself, and we are being asked a lot about how we don't lose hope, how we keep up, and I have an honest answer to this. One is the deep sense of responsibility as opposed to guilt, that I did some horrible things in my army service, as you saw in the film. And the way to take responsibility for me is not to feel, just to torture myself with guilt, but to do in the world. And part of doing and changing and taking responsibility is the commitment to this journey. And this is how, when you do, and you have partners who are sharing the same responsibility with you from the other side, it keeps you hopeful. So the other thing is that how I don't lose hope, because I feel responsible for Jamil and Suli and Rana and Suhair and Osama, all my Palestinian partners who are living under occupation. And it's my responsibility not to lose hope. If they don't lose hope, I have no privilege to lose hope. So that's another thing which is part of the alliance and the partnership.
Mm-hmm. There is another question, a practical question. I'm going to turn around so you can see the people in the audience.
Oh, great. I don't see them. Oh, now I see you. Wow, you're sitting in a proper theater.
Yeah.
I was referring to great to see you all.
I think, is there another question? Yes.
How do you say that people naive, because it's on a much more larger level of economics and politics? Everything changes.
Do you hear her or not?
No,
No,
not really.
So,
Not good enough.
In South Africa, for example, it was because of economics also, not only, but there's a struggle, but there's a higher level all the time, and sometimes it's getting you desperate. And then how?
wait, because I'm not going to be able to to repeat all of that. But I think the question is, how do you respond to people who say, aren't you a bit naive? Isn't it all much bigger? Aren't there much bigger things in playing than you have any effect on, or something like that?
It's a very good question. And of course, first of all, I understand the association, the negative association of being naive, which can be interpreted differently. By naive is someone who believe in people, believe in human beings, believe in faith and hope. And so on one hand, I understand the question, and yes, I'm naive. I want to remain naive, and that's why I'm in theater. Audience in theater are naive as well, and to be naive means that to have some kind of a clean perspective on the world. On the other hand, I totally understand that there is very brutal and harsh politics and geopolitics and everything, and nothing will be changed by theater or by goodwill and so on. But there is another perspective that we always refer to, and this is, first of all, people are blaming us. Why do you, it's always failed. Nonviolence and peace always failed. Yeah, like war is a big success. We didn't try it. It's the first time we're trying war. And no, we've tried war, we tried violence, and this is, it's naive to think that violence will solve something, will solve anything. I think it's more naive than to think that non-violence will solve anything. But there's another level, which is another, I would say, tone of this question of naive, is saying that how useless it is to preach to the choir. And what we believe is that we're not preaching to the choir. We're not just doing it for, the spirit and for our good feeling, but there's a way to activate, not to preach to the choir and not to convince the people who are not convinced, but to activate the people who needs activation. If we'll do that, if we will strengthen our community by saying, I'm naive, you're naive, and it's good that we're naive because we are together. We are developing something here. We are hanging on to something. Then people will join, and more people will join, and they will activate. And I see it now in the last 15 months that we are demonstrating every day for a ceasefire, for a hostages deal, and so on. We're getting bigger. There are more and more naive people who know that the responsibility now is to be on the street, to wave a sign, stop the war, ceasefire now. This is something that, even if it's naive, it's the right thing to do when there's a war going on. As simple as that.
Thank you. I think there was one last question, maybe.
Higher persons today.
It's like the question is about the position of the university on artivism, on what you're teaching. What is what's their stance on that?
It's a very good and complicated issue. First of all, I have to say that Tel-Aviv University, I don't know if you're familiar with the last 2 years of judicial reforms in Israel, that Netanyahu and his right-wing fascist government is not only harming the Palestinians, but trying to transform Israel, which is not a democracy. Yeah, I mean, it's an occupying state, which occupied the Palestinians, but internally, Israel is rather a democratic state, or was a democratic state, with elections and free media and other stuff. So Tel Aviv University luckily took the stance against the judicial reform, and kind of mark itself as the most lefty university in Israel, and leading the pro-democratic struggle against the fascist government and the judicial reform, which is actually a deterioration of an escalation from democracy into an authoritarian regime. I mean, we believe that Netanyahu's real goal and his government was to do some kind of process like Erdogan, like Putin, like Urban. So that's the tendency. And we struggle against it. And so Tel Aviv University is more democratic, more pluralist than any other institution in Israel. But still, it's very difficult, and we have to be very Brechtian in our work, in our struggle, in our tactics, and not only strategy. And we managed to do it. And there wasn't a censor even once since the war started within university. Okay. But it's kind of unique and rare in the Israeli atmosphere.
Dear Chen, I want to thank you most sincerely for a very inspirational talk and for the work you're doing. We will continue to follow it up and hope to do our own part in making a positive change. Dear attendees, thank you for being here behind me or online. I will share some links in the chat, both to the films Disturbing the Peace and Between Fences, and also to the website of Combatants for Peace, and soon to the new documentary, There's Another Way. We can read about that on the website, no doubt. I would like to end with post-October 7th personal message from Jamil Kassas, who we also saw in the documentary, the Palestinian Coordinator General of Combatants for Peace. And it's a message that features in the new film, you told me. It includes the first voice message that Jamil sent to you on the first day when the massacre of October 7 began to unfold in the media. And it goes like this. The voices calling for hatred, anger, and revenge are very loud. But Combatants for Peace will not stop calling out and showing that there is another way. We will not lose hope. We continue to work for our collective liberation from fear and oppression. Humanity should unite above all political, military, or economic interests. As Palestinians and Israelis, we call for a ceasefire to free all of the hostages in Gaza and the Palestinian prisoners in Israel, as well as working toward a lasting political solution. Let us preserve and hang on to our humanity and morality. This is the least we have. In solidarity, Jamil. Let's hope that this ceasefire remains and becomes more than just a ceasefire. Thank you so much, Ken.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you.